serves as the Executive Director of CARE New Jersey, the Council on American Islamic Relations New Jersey Chapter, America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy group. In his position as Executive Director, Selaedin works to enhance the understanding of Islam. We're good. I think we're on.
Yes, alhamdulillah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين. In the name of ICPC's board, the executive committee, and all the staff, I'm extremely grateful for Brother Selaedin to be here with us tonight. Brother Selaedin Maksut, for those who don't know him, he serves as the Executive Director of CARE New Jersey, the Council on American Islamic Relations New Jersey Chapter, America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy group. In his position as Executive Director, Selaedin works to enhance the understanding of Islam, encourage dialogue, protect civil rights, civil liberties, empower American Muslims, and build coalitions that promote justice and mutual understanding. In 2017, Selaedin received his bachelor's degree in religious studies from NYU. In 2019, he received his master's degree in Islamic studies from Columbia University. Prior to his time at CARE, Selaedin served as the Vice President of the Muslim Network, TMN, an organization that provides various services designed to build bridges between the Muslim communities of New Jersey. As a young activist, student of the Islamic tradition, and community leader, Selaedin works to defend, educate, and empower American Muslims in New Jersey. The topic today of our discussion, and I'm delighted to be in his presence, CARE New Jersey, is close and dear to my heart. It serves the Muslim community and others as well to find out their civil rights, to protect them, and to advocate for all the minorities that are in need of help. And the topic of today is how to navigate issues of rent, mortgages in the light of COVID and COVID-19 pandemic. Without any further ado, Selaedin Maksut, the floor is yours.
Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Thank you so much, Ammu. I appreciate you. So can you guys see my screen now?
We see your beautiful face.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, one second. Now you can see, yes?
Yep.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan. Bismillah. So thank you so much, Ammu, for the introduction. And thank you so much to ICPC for having us. This conversation is a very important one. As we all know, 2020 and even now into 2021, we are experiencing an unprecedented pandemic that has led to a lot of difficulty financially for many people across the country, really, especially here in New Jersey. And it's very important that we are educated about our rights, especially when it comes to those that are tenants or renters throughout the state. The presentation, inshallah, it'll have two parts. We'll speak about the pandemic specifically. What are some areas of focus around the COVID-19 issues? And then in part two, inshallah, we'll go over briefly some general tenant rights and laws against discrimination, inshallah. So just to get right into it, to answer the big question that everyone always has, if I cannot pay rent, will my landlord kick me out? On March 19th, to answer your question, on March 19th, Governor Murphy signed into law a moratorium on evictions. What does this mean? This means that we cannot, as a tenant, be kicked out of our unit until the moratorium is lifted. And this will remain in place 2 months after the state of emergency in New Jersey ends. So when the governor lifts the emergency, 2 months after that date, you still have the moratorium on rent. And the governor is quoted to have said, no one, and I repeat, no one in New Jersey should fear being kicked out of their homes in an emergency. Your landlord cannot remove you from your home during the pandemic. If your landlord is violating the moratorium, you can and you should fill out the New Jersey violation of executive order forms, on the covid19.nj.gov/forms/violation URL. If you want more information about this, a lot of the resources that are from this PowerPoint can be found on nj.gov. Essentially, all of the information is there. The forms and even a lot of the relief packages can also be found there. As of right now, the governor has extended the official public health emergency several times, and the current one is scheduled to expire on April 17th. And it is likely that he will also extend that one as well. So we might be seeing it extended into May or even June. But as of right now, April 17th, the current executive order expires, and that is when the moratorium will have a 2-month buffer for people that are renting. So some basic tenant rights in New Jersey. Alhamdulillah, New Jersey has some of the best tenant rights in the nation, actually. We have what is called the Just Cause for Eviction Act. This act essentially prohibits landlords from evicting anyone without good reason. They have to have a reason to kick you out of your apartment. They can't just do it because they feel like it. Landlords also have to renew their leases as long as the tenant agrees, and landlords must maintain the apartment. Maintenance of the apartment is essential, and if it is not upheld, then the tenant has a right to bring their landlord to court. And of course, the security deposit is something we'll talk about later, inshallah. So these are a few things that we have to be careful of. A lot of times, landlords will try these practices, which actually are illegal. And if you don't know your rights, and if you don't know the best practices, then your landlord can easily get away with some shady business. So it's very important to just keep educated about what is legal and what is illegal. So some basic things that we often see are landlords will make a verbal agreement about how many people can stay in your apartment, but that number is actually above the zoning, the permissibility of the town. So the town, say for example, only allows 7 or 8 people in this unit, and the landlord will say, I'll let you do 8 or 9. And then when the time comes that maybe the landlord does not want you to reside in that unit, he'll use the fact that you have multiple people in that unit against you as a way to kick you out. So never agree to anything that is verbal. You always want a written contract with the landlord, and you never want to verbally agree on something that is illegal. So you want to be able to maintain and uphold the city regulations. This is one thing that we often see. Also, they threaten to call immigration. If you're a citizen, obviously, you don't have to worry about this. If you're a green card holder, you don't have to worry about this. If you are here without paperwork, please let us know and have our office be in communication with you. But never let a landlord threaten you by them saying they'll call ICE. Occasionally, we see landlords make up additional maintenance fees at the end of the tenant's lease just so that they can take the security deposit. If it's not in the original lease, then do not let them charge you for this. A few other things that we often see. Landlords will try to transfer city fines and utilities to the tenant. That's illegal. You cannot do that. They'll falsify inspection documents, also illegal, and they'll lie about contents in various documents. So if you can't speak English, they'll try to translate it to you, and they'll essentially lie. This happens a lot. So if you cannot speak English, English is not your first language, and the landlord presents documents to you, have our office translate it for you, inshallah, and we'll explain to you the contents of that document. So do not talk to landlords over the phone or in person when dealing with rent-related matters, right? So if it has to do with maintenance or rent, and you want to make sure that the contract is upheld, it's best that you text, email, or write a letter. This way you have written proof if, in the worst case scenario, you have to go to court. Inshallah, court is the last resort, but you want to be able to prepare yourself for the worst case scenario. So if you have an agreement with your landlord, put it in a text message, put it in an email. This is the best way to prevent any problems down the line. You want to be able to save yourself, so it's best to put it in writing. And if you have any problems with intimidation from your landlord, inshallah, you can call our office and we can help mediate any problems. Security deposits. So this is a development as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Murphy has now issued an executive order that allows for tenants to use their security deposits to pay off back rent. This order lasts for 60 days after the public health emergency, so 2 months. And if you renew your lease, you have to realize that if you renew your lease, you do also have to pay back your security deposit. But as of right now, the current security deposit that you have, if you agree with your landlord, you can tell him to use that to pay for any rent that you might owe. Okay, so a few things. If you are actually facing eviction right now and the landlord is illegally evicting you, you call our office and let us know. What we can do is we can do various different things. But one thing that some organizations have considered are physical protests to prevent evictions from happening. Why do we do this? Because it makes a spectacle so that the city and the town acknowledge the risks that landlords are putting their tenants in. Because in a pandemic like this, if landlords are putting their tenants on the streets, this is a health risk, and it is something that the city does not want. And as a matter of fact, it would cost the city more money and more time, and it would give the city a bad image if landlords were consistently kicking tenants out in the middle of a pandemic. So call our office, and inshallah, we'll be able to communicate with local officials, with your landlord, and if worst case scenario, there are protests that happen to prevent these things from happening. So there is relief, financial relief that you can look into if you are a tenant. I won't go into the specifics, but if you're online, you can screenshot this page, and it details who is eligible for the relief. As of right now, it's a 12-month rental assistance program. So if you applied for the first phase and you got it, that's great, alhamdulillah. But if you did not fulfill the 12-month eligibility, you can continue to apply for phase 2 of what is known as the CVE wrap. And just to speak about some qualifications for who can apply for this funding. Of course, you have to be a resident in New Jersey, 18 years of age or older, and you have to either qualify for unemployment, or essentially you have to demonstrate that you are at risk of experiencing homelessness. And if you have reduced income or financial hardship, either due to the pandemic or related reasons. It can be other reasons as well. It's very flexible. And another thing to note is a household income at or below 80% of the area median income is also a qualification for funding. And this is the link in which you can go to apply for the funding, inshallah. If you need help for this application, you can call our office as well, and we can walk you through the process. Similarly, for mortgage relief, of course, we know homeowners and landlords are people too, and they also have struggles, and they also have bills to pay, and they also have they also are feeling the difficulty and the struggle of the pandemic as well. So similarly, they have rights as well, and they also have the opportunity to apply for financial assistance. So the same Executive Order 106 provides mortgage forbearance. So it pauses and reduces mortgage payments. But there are some qualifications as long as you don't kick out your tenants. So you have to keep your tenants in. You can't kick them out, but then you want to pause on your mortgage. So these are some things to keep in mind. And for more information about the mortgage relief, same thing, same link. njhousing.gov/foreclosure. And there's a phone number here you can call. And there is a 90-day grace period for the mortgage payments. But a few things to also note, this is very beneficial to keep in mind. When you receive this grace period for the 90 days, the institution that's granting you the mortgage cannot and will not negatively impact your credit scores. And there will be relief for the fees or charges, so you won't have issues there. And homeowners should act quickly, so they should be in constant communication with the lenders, and just have open communication with them via email, phone call, and document all of the communications and exchanges of information. This way, down the line, if you ever have any problems, you'll have documented proof that you attempted to communicate and you had an earnest attempt to resolve the matter. So quickly, part 2, I'll just speak generally about tenants' rights. Some of these things, of course, have been null and void as a result of the pandemic executive orders, but they're still relevant and it's good to know. So a lease, we all know what a lease is. I won't go into that, inshallah. But essentially, you have to be 18 years or older. A landlord's name has to be on it, and it should be written. And all of the fees and everything should be in the lease. The more detailed the lease, the better. You can always ask the landlord to update the lease if you want to, and add things to it. Termination of a lease agreement. The only reason a landlord can terminate a lease is if they offer a new lease at the end of the term. And then they can also increase rent at that time. They cannot evict anyone just because they feel like it. And they cannot evict you just because the lease ended. When the lease ends, they're obligated to renew it as long as the tenant agrees. Terminate the lease. A tenant can terminate the lease if, for the few reasons, moving out because of bad conditions. So there's not being maintained well, whether it's the utilities or anything in the suite. Housing is not handicap accessible. The lease termination is due to some sort of disability or some sort of illness that comes up that results in you having to move, or maybe going to a nursing home, or any kind of a reason that, a health reason that comes up that forces you to leave the housing and go somewhere else. And then the fourth reason a tenant can terminate a lease is for domestic violence. So if someone is afraid of issues at home or with relatives or anyone else, and they're facing domestic violence, if they can prove this with documentation, then they can break the lease and flee the vicinity for safety reasons. Pets. If you require a pet as a result of a disability, a landlord cannot discriminate against you. But any damages that arise as a result of having the pet in the home are your responsibility to pay for. Okay, right of entry. Basically, right of entry essentially means the landlord cannot just walk in on his own without your permission. He needs your consent, or he needs a judgment from a superior court in New Jersey. Without these two things, he really cannot just walk in. Now, with that said, it's important to also know that in a good lease, a robust lease will have a provision, a section that talks about a separate key that the landlord will have. Typically, a landlord has a key to your suite for safety reasons, in case of an emergency. So if there's an emergency, he is able to enter into the suite with that key. But he cannot access your property. He cannot, of course, and do anything with that, of course. Okay, security deposit, as I mentioned earlier, the security deposits now can be used to pay off rent as a result of the pandemic. But a few things about the deposit in general. the maximum security deposit cannot be more than 1.5 times 1 month's rent. So 1.5 times. The 30-day termination period for the landlord is when the landlord must return the deposit to the tenant. The landlord can deduct from the deposit if there's damage to the home. And of course, the tenant can challenge this as well. But the landlord must provide a itemized receipt and just documentation showing how he spent the deposit and what he spent it on to show the tenant where that money went. Okay, discrimination. This is very important as well. This is what our office deals with primarily. Essentially, it's very clear cut. There is no gray area here. A landlord cannot discriminate against anyone on the basis of race, religion, faith, color, national origin, ancestry, gender, you name it, physical or mental disabilities. It's absolutely illegal. And if it happens, you call our office, inshallah. The landlord can refuse to rent to an individual or family if they don't have sufficient income, if the family is too large for the unit, or if the person has poor credit history. But on the basis of race or religion or any of these categories, they cannot discriminate. And unfortunately, even in New Jersey, we have seen cases where landlords will either put postings up or they'll say, please do not share this posting with XYZ ethnic community or XYZ religious community. And it's a very clear discrimination that they don't want certain people to be their tenants. That is illegal. And if you have a confrontation with a landlord where you feel like you're being discriminated against, we always encourage you to record that interaction with video, if possible. Even in New Jersey, we have seen video footage of tenants capturing on video discrimination from landlords that specifically have targeted Muslims in the past and African Americans and just a lot of minority communities, unfortunately. Non-payment. So essentially, the landlord is prohibited from taking or holding tenants' possessions if they don't pay their rent. So the landlord cannot use your property, whatever you own, inside or outside of the unit, to pay off any back rent. That's illegal. And I think finally, this is the last slide, inshallah, and we'll wrap it up with this. The landlord, if this happens, in the case of an eviction, and this would be outside of the COVID-19 pandemic, but if an eviction is happening and a landlord turns off the utilities, or if he locks the doors, or if he changes the locks in some way, or if he turns off your lights or the water, all of these things are illegal. A landlord cannot do it's called self-help evictions. These things are absolutely illegal. If this does happen to you, you do have the right to call the police, and the police officer will know that this activity is prohibited and the landlord cannot do that, especially if there's no prior agreement with the tenant. So with that, inshallah, I'll wrap it up. If you face any of these issues, whether you're in New Jersey or throughout, even in other states as well, you can call our office or call other care chapters across the country. Essentially, we help those that face discrimination on the basis of their race or religion. But in this time of COVID-19 pandemic, we're also helping people with issues with rent and trying to navigate legal paperwork. We also write letters on behalf of tenants to their landlords. We can do many different things. It's very, very important to keep open communication and dialogue with your landlord. So if you have any issues, just be honest with them. Let them know about your financial situation and talk about maybe payment plans that you can work out with them. A lot of landlords are very understanding, and they will work with you if you are open and honest with them. Inshallah, this is a benefit to you guys. If you have any questions, please feel free to call our office, or you can email us, or our website link is here. And I'm happy to take any questions, inshallah. So with that, I can stop sharing with that.
While waiting for other questions from the audience, I do have, if a person defaults on their rent during COVID, would that person be responsible for the unpaid rent later?
As of right now, yeah, as of right now, for what we're seeing, rent will accrue. So that is going to build up. And in some cases, unfortunately, there are fees as well. We have to be very careful with the fees. Some landlords, what we're seeing, are slapping on exuberant amount of fees that are not reasonable or normal. If this is happening to you, you can contact us and we'll help address the situation with the fees. But yes, rent will build up, which is why there is opportunities for financial assistance that was mentioned earlier.
We should also note that it could affect their credit report as well.
That's a good point.
Some of the landlords do report unpaid rent and unpaid fees as well. So I think we should note it to our community. If they should not just feel like, oh, I didn't pay it, that's it, it's over, it's not done with. I think that's important.
Yeah.
You spoke a little bit about verbal agreements. Are they binding in the court of law, or are they not acceptable?
Technically, a lease can be a verbal agreement. This is permissible, but we strongly advise against it. It is best to have some sort of documentation detailing the lease, even if it's something simple and small. But the more paperwork, the better. This way, you can protect yourself if anything were to happen. This is worst case scenario. This is planning for the future. It's always best to have a written agreement, and both sides can have copies. Technically, oral agreements are permissible and are legal with witnesses, but again, it's not the best choice to have.
You spoke extensively, obviously, about residential leases. Is there anything to be addressed about commercial leases? If people are renting for their businesses, does the same thing apply? Obviously, commercial leases, they have different securities. It could go up to 2 months worth of rent, and there is other fees as well. Is there any component to that in the COVID relief for the rent, or there's none?
That's a good question. As you mentioned, most of what we've discussed is for residential renters, especially those that might be facing eviction and have children and families, and they're putting their health at risk and their safety at risk. As for commercial, I'm not too sure. This would be a question I have to dig into myself. If you call our office, inshallah, anyone has this problem, we can look into it ourselves. We can have the attorney look into it and investigate. But off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
Very well. So I guess we're waiting for some questions from the audience. I don't want to use up too much of the time.
No problem. I think we have some in the comments section here.
Comments. There we go. Can domestic violence be from neighbors that cause a person to feel unsafe in my home?
So essentially, if you do have reason to believe that you are unsafe in that home, and domestic violence is a legitimate threat, and you can demonstrate that to your landlord, then that is enough of a reason to break the lease. Any sort of feeling of being unsafe, if it can be demonstrated and you can show that, and you have open dialogue and communication with your landlord, it is enough of a reason to break the lease. And again, if you have any issues with that, please call our office, because we can definitely help with that, inshallah.
So there's another comment. Discrimination happened, but you don't have evidence or documents. How can a person navigate that?
Yeah, it's very difficult when you don't have some sort of proof. And essentially, what we advise is to always use your phone to your benefit, whether it's recording, even audio, for example. It is legal in New Jersey to record without another person's permission. So you do not have to ask for permission. You can record either audio or video, and this will help build your case. If you don't have evidence, my suggestion is moving forward to continue to build it. But even witnesses essentially is also a good option as well. So if you have any witnesses or anyone that can testify to what you have faced, this would be helpful.
So a question that, how about a tenant that is squatting on a property with no agreement with the new owner? So there may be a exchange of hands of owners of the property, and there is tenants, and there's some tenants that are just squatting. They don't want to move, they don't want to pay, they don't want to enter into agreements. What applies to them?
Okay, if there's no agreement, well, so what happens is if a tenant's agreement comes to an end, then because of the law we mentioned earlier, it automatically is renewed, and the permission of the landlord is not needed. So the lease is renewed, and the tenant can remain in that building. If it's a result, if there's a situation where the owner switches and there's a new owner, I can't answer. I'd have to ask the attorney on the staff. But when leases do end, they are allowed to automatically renew, and the tenant is allowed to stay within that building or that suite. That the landlord does not need to justify that. But yeah.
So I'm unable to enter comments on here, but if someone can share the link, where is the link that you, Brother Selaedin, were talking about, and how can we contact you, please? I really need help. If you could just share your phone number, and or if you could also tell people, you could go back to that slide and show them how to screenshot their computer, and they could take a picture of that so they can contact your office.
Yes. So this is our information. This phone number here, you can call for our office. This is our website link, and this is our email. You can shoot us an email, or you can file a incident report on our website. The best way to contact us is through phone, though. So if you have a situation where you want to explain anything to us, you can call us by phone. But if if you need to email us documents, or you want to email us the lease, or you have any kind of evidence you want to share with us, you can do so vis-a-vis the email at info@nj.care.com.
And would you be able to also share the link for the COVID relief bill and information?
Yes. Yes. Give me 1 second.
We're still waiting for comments for anybody who's watching or would like to ask any questions to the speaker, who has been extremely helpful in his presentation. We are not pausing. We're just waiting for the link to be posted. Brother Selaedin is looking for it. This is the link for to access information about the COVID relief for people who are renting and who are going through a rough time paying their bills, but they have relief from the state government to stay in their places, and there's no eviction until April 15th as it stands right now, but eviction proceedings would not take place until 60 days after that cutoff date, which, if I recall correctly from the slide, is April 17th.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm trying to put it in the chat, but I don't know how to.
And this is where Sister Rana, our technical back engineer, will step in and do that.
Here we go. I can share it with her privately, and then inshallah she can share it in the chat. Okay, so that's one link. And then the second link, I'm going to share it here. This is for the financial assistance. As the brother said, April 17th is the end date, but it is very likely that the governor will extend it one more time. As for the moratorium, so we'll see, inshallah. But there are a lot of opportunities for relief. These are just state state laws and state financial assistance. There are federal options. These things are a bit more complicated and a bit harder to attain. I think New Jersey really has some of the best options. Alhamdulillah, we're very lucky for that. But a lot of the resources can be found on these two links, and it's both for landlords and tenants. So these two are very helpful. A lot of the qualifications and the qualifications are the same for the most part. If you can demonstrate that you are facing financial burden as a result of the pandemic, then you can qualify for assistance and you can apply for it, inshallah.
If I may just bring up to your attention what Brother Selaedin mentioned earlier, if there's any issues that you have, it's best to communicate that openly and directly with your landlord. So at least the avenues of communications are clear, open, well documented. So at least, like he said, your landlord is still a human being. He has a responsibility, or she has responsibilities. It's best to be open. I mean, our religion teaches us to be open, and also to our dealing with others and our leases and our contracts, push us to be transparent in that effect. So, any more comments? MashaAllah, Habibna. Any more comments that we have or questions? So to contact CARE in New Jersey, it's care.nj.com is the website.
I can share that too, actually. So it's nj.care.com. I just put that in the chat.
Perfect.
Okay.
And also, I saw that Sister Rana Jazakallah Khair shared also for the people who are unable to pay their mortgage, for them to have relief as well. So there are programs that are available not only to the tenants, but also to the landlords who are unable to keep up with their responsibilities towards their mortgage. Of course, these have been hard times and difficult times on everyone. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with a quick relief from these effects of the pandemic. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in this coming month of Ramadan. My sincere and personal and warm thanks to my beloved brother Selaedin Maksut. It brings a smile to my face to always see him, but it brings me even more smile to be in his presence and to listen to his lovely presentation. My sincere also thanks to my sister Rana, who has been the backbone of all these programs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. And we cannot be able to do anything without the presence of our audience and our community. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. This concludes our broadcast. Jazakumullah khair. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر جزاكم الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.